extend the welcome to Ambassador Dr. Abdul Aziz Al Wasel, who is the permanent representative of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to the United Nations in New York. So, Ambassador, please join us on the stage. Can you also welcome Her Excellency Ambassador Dijke Potzel? She's the Director General of Crisis Prevention, Stabilization, Peacebuilding and Humanitarian Assistance at the Federal Foreign Office in Germany. So, Ambassador Dijke Potzel, please, I'm sure you're in the room, if you could join us, please do come and join us on the stage. Ambassador Potzel. Can we also welcome Ms. Susanna Moorhead? Now, Susanna is chair of the OECD's Development Assistance Committee, otherwise known as the DAC. I'm not hearing much applause, please. Can you welcome our guests, please? Show your appreciation. I always get a little bit nervous when there's an absence of applause. Can you please also welcome Ms. Pramila Patten? Pramila is the Special Representative of the Secretary-General on Sexual Violence in Conflict. Pramila Patten, please come and join us. Pramila? And also, finally, can we welcome Felipe Lazzarini? Felipe is the Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. So please do come and join us. Everybody's together. Please come and join us. Panel, thank you so much for being here. And let me kick off with Dr. Abdulaziz Al Wasel. Now, Dr. Aziz, Saudi Arabia has an extremely progressive, robust and ambitious agenda for the future that is encapsulated in Vision 2030, and that in itself is built on the idea of a vibrant society that has a thriving economy. Now, in October 2021, the Kingdom also announced the Middle East Green Initiative. So, in the context of what is happening and what is planned, what do you see as Saudi's future as a humanitarian leader and as a visionary, not just for the region, but also beyond the Middle East? Where is the journey taking you? Yeah, I think that's it, fantastic.
It's great to be in Riyadh, actually, and it's an honor to be in the Riyadh International Humanitarian Forum. The interconnection challenges require actually a wide and inclusive collaboration among all of us. We cannot basically tackle the humanitarian needs, especially, and other crisis without acting collectively. And in Saudi Arabia, in fact, we launch many initiatives, targeting climate change, targeting also food security, energy security. And among these initiatives is the Saudi Green Initiative and Middle East Green Initiatives. These initiatives launched by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, and with the aim to advance environmental protection, sustainable energy transition, and also a cleaner future for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. With a very ambitious target, net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2060. Also, the two initiatives are important in the sense that they will provide not only environmental protection, but also clean energy projects. The Saudi Green Initiative aims to plant 10 billion trees and additional 40 billion trees in the region in the upcoming decades. In fact, the Vision Saudi 2030 is full of initiatives that will help not only the kingdom but the region as a whole.
Okay, thank you very much. And let me bring in Ambassador Potzel, because internationally we know that Germany has actually been the second biggest aid donor for the last 5 years. And what I want to know from you is, it's really a comparison, because are there differences that you see in the crises of 2022 and of course the ones which are happening now and looming further forward for this year, in comparison to what we saw happening 4 or 5 years ago? What are the key differences that you've been able to identify?
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for having me, and thanks to Saudi Arabia for organizing this conference. It's really a pleasure to be here. Germany is indeed the second largest bilateral donor in assistance for humanitarian assistance, but we've only had this position for a couple of years now because, obviously, because of the rising urgency and intensity of crises. And that has a number of reasons. Obviously, conflict and displacement has reached really new records, very disturbing records. And plus, and it was said before, the extreme weather changes and climate change, of course, have a huge impact on what is happening in terms of humanitarian needs. So yes, there is a change in crises, and if you look ahead, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look as if we are going to see an improvement very soon. So we have a huge responsibility. This is also what we as Germany feel, that we do have a responsibility to help people in need, to help the most vulnerable. But we have to be frank and honest, and it was said in the other panel that the international community needs to do more. So we have to step up our efforts to help more people, to give more, to distribute more fairly. And my Swedish colleague has said before how thin the layer of donors is really. And if you look at the top 3, that's the United States, that's the EU, and that's Germany, pay for 60% of the humanitarian assistance. And that is, again, not sustainable. So this is also an opportunity to plead with others to do more, because the people in need, they are not responsible for what has happened to them, and they need our dire support. So we need to be better also in what we do. Of course, we first and foremost need to tackle the root causes. We have to help to solve conflicts and increase stabilization efforts. And what we feel is very important, to get better in bringing together humanitarians, development actors, stabilization efforts, and the peace pillar. And so we are working hard to do that, because, as I said, we don't see crises getting less, but unfortunately rather the contrary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that. But I mean, I like this, the point which you made as well about having an honest conversation, actually recognizing what it is that has to be done to actually fulfill the goals going forward. And this is what we've been having here, an honest conversation, because we certainly kicked that off with the first part of the panel. But Susanna Moorhead, last December, the UN launched the Global Humanitarian Overview for 2023. It happened here in Riyadh. I was lucky enough to witness this. But the point is, they asked for $52 billion to cover humanitarian needs during the year. That is a big ask, especially given what is happening on the global stage economically. But what should the aid community itself be doing to influence the DAC Club to provide better funding for humanitarian responses? Are there certain things they can do better? And I guess that there's an urgency to do this. The clock is not going to stop ticking for anyone.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I don't want to repeat what others have said, but you say 52 billion. I mean, total official development assistance is about 185 billion. So you're talking about over 25%. Now, DAC members have tried to increase ODA levels in recent years, but it hasn't gone up anything like as fast as demand. And in a more or less flat ODA climate, every dollar that you spend on humanitarian is one that you don't spend on development. So I'm afraid there's no way around the need to get more people into the club. And as we've already heard, there are 3 DAC members who are providing well over 60% of humanitarian aid. Overall, including the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, there are perhaps 10 donors in the world picking up 80% of the burden. So it's pretty simple. It's where is everybody else? And please don't tell me that we can't afford it. I mean, I would argue that we can't afford not to. We managed to afford our own quantitative easing for domestic financial crises. We managed to afford massive investments to deal with the COVID pandemic. We managed to afford huge increases in defense budgets. We can afford this. And this is not about charity. It is about investing in everybody's future. So you can ask the question any way you like, but there is no getting around the fundamental need for more resource and more people, more nations, more of the private sector, more philanthropists to contribute.
A very powerful point as well, because again, one of the points which emerged in the first panel, and we're going to hear a lot more about this, is this feeling that some countries are carrying more of the share than others. And as you've rightly said, we can afford it. You know, there was a COVID-19 response. There is the ability to respond to internal crises. We find the money. So that means there's no excuse for saying we haven't got it, which is why the burden has to go elsewhere. But Pramila Patton, when we talk about funding as well, we cannot dissociate it from gender. Now, among other forms of GBV, conflict-related sexual violence, we know it impacts the lives of survivors, but worryingly, it disproportionately affects women and girls in conflict zones. So my question to you is how can humanitarian actors and the donor community strengthen that collective response to meet the specialized needs of CRSV and GBV survivors? There is a moral imperative attached to this. Yeah, I think we have a few microphone problems. Right, we have a few microphone problems. So whilst we resolve it, what's going to happen is that a microphone is going to get passed along the line. And hopefully, once it reaches Pramila, we will be able to hear her, because I know that this is a subject which she holds very, very dear to her heart and that she wants to expand on. So can you tap the microphone, Pramila? Can you tap the head of the microphone just to make... It's on, is it? That's fantastic. Do you need me to repeat the question, or are you okay?
No, I'm okay.
Fantastic.
I'm okay. Thank you so much. And thank you for the question, actually. And even in your question, the way you framed it, that you are actually recognizing that victims of conflict-related sexual violence have specialized needs. And I think that is my very first message to both the humanitarian actors and to the donor community. It is true that women and girls are disproportionately impacted by all forms of gender-based violence, including conflict-related sexual violence, as a result of structural gender-based discrimination. But victims of conflict-related sexual violence suffer a violation of both their individual rights and collective peace and security. And I think it's critical for the donor community to understand that the devastating impact of sexual violence used as a tactic of war on women and girls significantly, but also against men and boys, and that sexual violence is plaguing conflict. With every new wave of warfare, we see a rising tide of sexual violence. And I can tell you that the sexual violence is also becoming more and more brutal. I only hear about gang rape. I mean, if we look at Ukraine, only 3 days after the Russian aggression, the first reports of brutal sexual violence surfaced. And the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine raised the alarm bell. So it is important to understand the specific experience of victims of CRSV and their specific needs. For example, the psychosocial support that is provided in general to victims of gender-based violence, whether it is domestic violence, is simply not adapted to victims of sexual violence in conflict, where the impact is devastating, whether it is their health, their sexual and reproductive health, and their mental health. I have seen in DRC and in South Sudan babies of 8 months old, victims of sexual violence. Every year, the report of the Secretary General paints a harrowing picture of sexual violence being used as a tactic of war, of torture, of terror, a tool of reprisal and political repression. And we see men and boys where there are no services tailored to their needs, children with no tailored services. So that's my first message to both the the donor community and the humanitarian workers. The survivors need more than our solidarity. They need sustained and adequate investment of resources to build shattered lives and livelihoods. Since I took office, I have noticed this lack of awareness about the drivers and dynamics of conflict-related sexual violence, and I have been advocating for a survivor-centered approach because it is the only approach that can ensure the recovery of survivors. And yet, as humanitarian needs increase across the globe, gender-based violence programming remains chronically underfunded, generally accounting for less than 1% of humanitarian assistance. And I just want to give you one number. According to the Financial Tracking Service, only 18% of GBV funding that was requested for humanitarian operations was received for the year 2022, while we know that annual military spending continues to increase dramatically. So my message is that if we are serious about fulfilling our obligation to survivors and affected communities, we must reverse this trend. And another important message for the humanitarian community is that you will not meet the needs of survivors of CRSV if these needs are not articulated in your programming and funding requests. And again, one example, last year, the Central Emergency Response Fund allocated $735 million, including $27.6 million for the response to GBV in emergencies. And believe me, out of these allocations, CRSV was mentioned in only one project proposal, namely to support the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to investigate crimes of CRSV within Ukraine for an overall budget of $2 million. And this equates to just 0.27% invested in the need for victims of sexual violence. So I just want to say that this is happening at a time of multiple crises characterized by acute sexual violence from Ethiopia to Ukraine to Haiti, as well as an epidemic of coup and unconstitutional shifts in power in settings such as Afghanistan, Myanmar, Guinea, Mali, and Sudan, which have reduced civic space and turned back the clock on women's rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That was very powerfully expressed, and I want you to come into the conversation, Felipe Lazzarini, because look, what we've heard from our panelists is that more money is needed because of the crisis which humanitarians are currently facing. We heard there from Pramila that it's really important that we get the funding to the victims of sexual violence in the conflict zone, and concerns that perhaps, or the sense I get is a worry that maybe their needs might not necessarily be as much a priority to some as it is to others. But look, any initiative is going to need funding. We heard earlier from Suzanne that we can make the money happen if we want to, and yet the irony is that you represent the UNRWA, you're facing a growing debt crisis. So my question to you is, what other sources have you pursued or even considered using so that you can augment the dwindling amount of direct international aid that you're receiving? Because from my perspective, I would imagine that you need more money given what is happening now and what lies ahead.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you, Dr. Rabia, for hosting us and organizing this conversation. And the short answer is, yes, I agree. If there is political will, we wouldn't be in a financial crisis when it comes to an agency like UNRWA. Just to understand the context, I often describe our agencies as being the only one providing public-like services to one of the most underprivileged community, being the Palestinian refugees in the region. We run, in fact, the Ministry of Education. We run the Ministry of Primary Health Care. And in addition of that, we are also asked to respond to any new emergencies, like, for example, the latest earthquake. So in total, our budget is $1.6 billion in 2023. Now, when you run an organization of this size, of this scale, of this scope, you need predictable funding. And as we heard this morning, we have a very loyal, strong donor base, but it's a very limited one. These are always the 10 same the state minister this morning referred to. Now, the impact of that is that the quality of our services has decreased. The trust of the refugees vis-à-vis the agency is waning, and also our ability to implement the mandate is becoming more and more difficult because we still need to keep these services in a region where needs are increasing at a time the funding is stagnating. So over the last few years, we have looked at different avenues. The first one, there is absolutely no magic behind it. We need predictable, reliable funding. We know exactly what the public services we are providing will cost to this population. We have a budget, we can prepare long in advance. For this, we need the political will for this agency to continue to provide this prospect to the Palestinian refugees. If I look at the region here, the region here has traditionally been very generous vis-à-vis UNRWA, but it has been uneven from one year to the other one. We had better year, up to 25% of our budget, but we had also years, like 2 years ago, which was less than 3% of our budget. And I do believe that more can be done to increase the predictability of the funding coming from this region. We are also looking at diversifying the donor base. We keep hearing about diversifying, though it's not an easy one. We are now looking at, when it comes to countries, to expand to Asia, where we have indication that some countries want to show their solidarity to the region. But we are also obviously looking at the private sector, and not just the corporate, but also the philanthropic charities. An area where we have to invest, but do not have yet the resource to invest, is digital fundraising, which seems to be one of the fastest growing fundraising tool nowadays. Now we can dream a little bit and say, let's say we have a platform with 1 million subscribers, they give $10 a month each. That would certainly solve part of the financial crisis the organization is in. We have also looked over the last 2 years to increase partnership with other UN agencies, but this has its own limitation because it's also looked through a political lens, and we have also tried to increase the regular budget of the United Nations, but here also political consideration show their limits.
Okay, it's an interesting point that you raised because Saudi has been extremely generous. The Middle East has been very generous in coming forward and assisting. And I guess my point to you is that other countries may feel, well, actually, there's a global economic crisis and we're under pressure. It puts you under pressure because I guess the danger is that you will not be in pole position in the pecking order, shall we say. And again, as you've expressed here, your worry is that by not getting the level of funding that you need, it means that you're not delivering the quality of service that you're capable of giving.
I mean, beyond the services we are providing, we are also providing a sense of safety and a sense of prospect to one of the most underprivileged community in the region,
and you're having to give more.
Which today feels totally abandoned by the international community.
And you're having to give more as well because of the crisis.
And we have to give more, and the less we can give because they expect more, the more they feel abandoned by the international community, and the more there is also a risk that this is fueling an already tense situation here in the region. when young Palestinians have nothing else to lose, what do? We have seen that many of them in Lebanon, in Syria, and in Gaza are tempting their chance to cross the sea, knowing perfectly that they might not succeed, but out of despair they will do this. Or in other places, out of despair, they might be tempted to be taken into cycle and spiral of violence. And I'm sure that this is something none of us here wants to see happening in this region.
So again, it puts pressure on you because in terms of the services you're providing, it's just to give people hope so that they don't go in the wrong direction. But Dr. Potso, let me come to you, because when we're discussing aid strategies, again referenced here, anticipatory action, it's always going to feature, and again, Germany is one of its biggest, most powerful advocates. Now, your country, in fact, was one of the first donors to invest in the concept before the usage became so common. So how do you see it now? Does it still have the ambition, and can it be realistic, given that, yes, it is predictive, but you can't predict combat, you can't predict war, and should the model be replicated when we're dealing with not just the crises of today, but also the future, or would it have to be altered, mutated in some way, shape or form?
Thank you very much for the question. We are very much convinced of the potential for anticipatory action. It seems to me like really something that is so clear that this works. Acting ahead of a disaster simply is more effective. It saves money, but it is also much more dignified for the people in need. So we really feel as Germany that it is a moral imperative to act before disaster strikes. And we can see that, like in a lot of developed countries, of course, if we know that a storm is coming, we go and prepare shelters and we protect our houses and what have you. And a lot of people around the world are not able to do that. Now we know that in at least 20% of the cases for weather-induced disasters, we have that data, we know that it's coming. But we only, for the time being, spend internationally 1 to 2% of the humanitarian assistance budget for anticipatory action. So there is much more that we can do, even if we're only talking weather-induced catastrophes. Now we have pledged that we are going to spend 5% of this year's budget at least for humanitarian, for anticipatory action, and that would amount to 135 million. But I think there is much more scope. We need to scale up those efforts. We have also pushed within the G7 during our presidency for more anticipatory action, and the G7 have committed to put more money in it. But I think it's something that everybody should look into. And as we have talked about the funding gap, this is a way to spend money better. And just to give you one example, again, weather-induced, but the FAO has spent 230 million to prevent or to go in early to prevent the effects of a desert locust plague. Now, if they hadn't done it, it would have cost $1.7 billion to care for the consequences. So I think it is, like, in terms of funding gaps and reduced funding, it really is a matter of sort of normalcy to invest in it. And yes, I also fear that given that we have data, given that we have the intelligence about, like, also other crises looming, it is much better to go in early, and it is not only better, but as I said, I think it is really a moral imperative to help people up front and not to wait till the catastrophe happens, and again, lives are at stake.
Of course, and that means changing the response model itself. But look, anticipatory action, the various strategies, they're only really going to work, I guess, if we form partnerships. And this is where you come into the conversation, Ambassador Abdulaziz Al-Wassal, because what do you see as the importance of multilateralism to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and how do you prioritize your global partnerships among not just member states, but also UN agencies?
Yes, actually, Saudi Arabia is very much committed to multilateralism, and we believe that engaging and cooperating with the members of the international community and with international organizations, civil society is very important for the world peace and security. In fact, we are in the Kingdom have a very unique experience to share with members of the international community, especially under our Vision 2030 and the transformation journey that Saudi Arabia has been going through in the last few years. It is well known that Saudi Arabia has one of the largest economy in the Middle East and also the largest donor in the region, and therefore we act and also blessed with a very strategic location. We're basically in the heart of the world, and therefore we could provide our partners with assistance and also with expertise. And also Saudi Arabia was and still is a mediator for peace, and we seek to assist countries to reach peace in situation of conflict. And when it comes to the United Nations, in fact, Saudi Arabia is a founding member of the United Nations, and also we have a strategic partnership with humanitarian agencies and also other agencies, including, of course, OCHA. One of the important issues that we always focus on is the fact that the creation of the United Nations was based on maintaining peace and security. Therefore, we strive to have peace in our region and beyond, believing that actually armed conflict is the main cause for humanitarian needs. And also we try to do our best to have food security in affected regions, and as we know that armed conflict mitigates negative effects on people, especially when it comes to food and the danger of hunger. And also at the regional level, we are very active in hosting events and also having major initiatives that will be in the benefits of members of the region and also the world as a whole. As we all know that in last year, Saudi Arabia hosted two major summits, Jeddah Summit for Security and Development and also Riyadh Summit for Cooperation and Development. Both aim and to strengthen our partnership and also to make sure that what we do is basically in the benefit not only to our citizens but also to the people of the region and the people of the world as a whole. Also, we trying to do our best to partner with others in the grain, in the export of grain and foodstuff to needy people around the world. We understand that Africa has been very affected by the situation, the current situation of the world, and therefore we trying to work together with our partners to make sure that food security and availability of food is there for everyone, not only in the African continent but in all countries.
Okay, so that's very, very, very comprehensive response to that question, and thank you so much. It really has placed everything in a very powerful context. Let me go to Susanna Moorhead, because I'm conscious of the fact that we have just under 10 minutes left, so let's see what we can actually squeeze in that time. But from your perspective, do you think there will ever be a time when all DAC members will effectively raise their official development assistance to 0.7% of their national income, 0.7%? Is that target still realistic? And crucially, if it is, how do we get there?
Well, I mean, look, I wish that would happen, but what I wish or want isn't really the point. we can continue to lobby for that. But, I mean, as I said earlier, this is essentially a political choice, not an economic one. And it's a political choice, certainly, that the members of the Development Assistance Committee have to make, but also many, many more countries in the world have to make. So what I would like to see is a coalition of the willing to make the strong political case that this is an investment in everyone's future, and to be clear that it's public money, which is critically important, but also the private sector, philanthropy, and that the public resources that we do have are made to work as hard as possible. So the previous panel, Andrew Mitchell mentioned the Bridgetown agenda. Now this is an innovative agenda to look at the quantum of financing for humanitarian and development, and is saying that we can't leave anything off the table. We've got to look at debt, we've got to look at the reform of the multilateral development banks, we've got to look at bilateral assistance, and we've got to make the case to citizens, to taxpayers, to the next generation, that what we're doing already works reasonably well. I think we've got to really avoid this idea that we are throwing good money after bad. We're not. I mean, the humanitarian crisis is a combination of just the quantum of crises, but also the laying on of COVID and then natural disasters, climate, famine. It's just the scale is beyond anything that the system was designed to cope with. So 0.7 would just be the starting point, but actually there's a far more existential question to answer, which is how do we reform the international architecture, and how do we generate the political will in all our countries to say this works, we've learnt a lot. Certainly we could do better on gender-based violence, we could do better on the efficiency of the system, we need to invest far more in peace and security, we need to really deliver the humanitarian development peace nexus, we need much more diplomacy, but it's not just about 0.7, and it's not just about the very small number of extremely generous donors we have at the moment. And this needs political leadership at the very highest level. This is heads of government who need to make the case. And I think the media needs to step up. Don't let people in poorer countries be the hidden victims of Russian aggression. We need to collectively redouble our commitments to consign famine to the history books. We thought we'd done that in the 20th century, and there are people starving to death now in 2023, and it is a blight on humanity, it's a blight on all of us that we let that happen.
Absolutely, I don't think you'll get any disagreement on that one. We have 5 minutes left, so I want to squeeze in 3 questions. The first of these goes to you, Felipe, because you said in a recent talk that when we speak to refugees, all they want to do is to live with dignity, to use the Arabic word, and apologies if I have mispronounced it, bakarama. So given the challenges that you're facing, how can you maintain your promise to those that you help that you will give them that dignity which they crave?
Well, we heard this morning also the importance of social and economic inclusion. And this is what I mean when we talk about giving back some dignity and making sure that all these youth who have aspiration for a better future can become economically self-independent. Now, just 2 weeks before the earthquake, I was in Aleppo. I met a group of young people who at the Vocational Training Center of UNRWA. They asked me training for coding, for photovoltaic, and also English courses so that they can stay connected with the rest of the world. The reality today is that our vocational training, what we are teaching, is not anymore in line with what the economy needs. But we have the potential. We had an extraordinary success stories in Gaza recently where 100 coders working for the organization are providing solutions for the broader UN system worldwide. And we can do much more with this IT hub. So our commitment to that is we need to invest in the future employability of the young Palestinian, and this starts even at school, at the primary school, where we need also to bridge the digital divide by providing labs and ensuring that issues of connectivities or tablet be also addressed.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Pramila, we only have about a minute left, so very, very briefly, I'm so sorry to have to rush you on this because time is the enemy. Can you share with us at least one of the key achievements of UN Action and CRSV Multi-Partner Trust Fund supporting humanitarian operations so that you can meet the needs of those you serve?
Well, thank you for the question. In fact, task we've a mandate by the Security Council to provide strategic leadership and also to strengthen existing United Nations coordination mechanism in order to foster synergy of action and to ensure that the UN delivers as one. I'm pleased to say that since 2017, during my tenure, the network itself has grown from 11 entities to 24 entities. And today we are working, for example, very closely with the Office of Counter-Terrorism to address the impact of sexual violence as a tactic of terrorism, with UNEP to focus on the nexus with climate insecurity, with the International Trade Center to focus on economic empowerment of women. In terms of the most recent flagship initiative of UN Action, we launched last year during the General Assembly a first prevention framework for conflict-related sexual violence, because it's been widely recognized that sexual violence in conflict is preventable. It's not collateral damage. It's not a byproduct of war. And having 24 UN agencies converging and working on that prevention framework was quite remarkable. And now we're trying to roll it in country. It's intended to be a roadmap for all actors and stakeholders, but especially member states and UN agencies to expand their prevention, early warning and risk mitigation measures.
Okay, thank you so much for that. We have 1 minute left, so please all of you be very, very brief. Pramila, hold on to that mic. Once you've answered, please pass it along. In the last minute, okay, what would you like to see implemented when we meet again here in Riyadh in 2 years' time? Pramila, then please move the microphone along, please, very briefly.
Well, I would like to say that right now we are unfortunately failing and leaving behind many victims of sexual violence. I would like to ensure that we reach many more victims and that we give them more than just solidarity, that there is dedicated, flexible funding, like the point that Filippo Grandi made this morning, flexible funding for us to be able to deliver on our mandate, and that the funding focuses also on prevention.
Okay, thank you very much. If you can pass the microphone to Susanna, please. Very briefly.
Peace, and get women involved in the peace process, political leadership at the highest levels, and share more of our prosperity.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Wassel, please, very briefly.
I believe we hope and we wish that we will be able to have more mechanisms to, tackling the causes of humanitarian needs, namely better mechanism to control armed conflict and also natural disaster.
Thank you very much. And Ambassador Dijker Potzel, please.
Thank you. I wish to see far less conflict, better reaction to climate change, and more people joining in humanitarian assistance, i.e. a broader donor base.
Thank you very much. Final word to Felipe Lazzarini.
Yeah, I would like to see Palestinian youth more valued in the future and less pushed to the brink. And we have the instrument here collectively. We can have partnership with universities, institute, Ministry of Labor to bring this social economic inclusion in the region for them. Thank you.
Panel, thank you so much for your contribution. Please show your appreciation to them. Thank you so much. Thank you. And we're going to clear the stage to make way for the next panel, but please do stay with us, and I'm sure I'll see most of you later today, but thank you so much.